The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, this is Gavin Wood here. We're going to start in approximately 2 minutes. Thanks. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Understanding Ransomware Attacks and How to Defeat Them. This webinar is being run by Forces and Quorum. My name is Gavin Wood, Technical Director here at Forces, and I'm joined by Neill Clingan, Technical Director at Quorum. So just a couple of things before we get started, a bit of housekeeping. So we'll mute all lines just during the webinar. If you've got any questions, if you use the chat widget, and we'll get through those at the end of the webinar if we've got time. We'll do our best to answer any questions, and we will email any answers that we can't do during this broadcast. And we'll also record this presentation so that it'll be available offline. Okay, the agenda for today, a brief introduction to Forces. Then we're going to look at ransomware trends and in detail ransomware attacks, preventative measures, and what happens if all those preventative measures fail. What's the last line of defense? So a little bit about Forces. Forces has been in business for about 22 years, and we focus purely on IT security. We partner with a range of IT security vendors. These vendors are able to provide solutions for all part of the IT security landscape. And these include solutions such as email filtering, web filtering, firewalls, UTM-style devices, endpoint protection, two-factor authentication, SIEM, and NAC solutions. Hopefully some of you know that we built our business on long-term relationships with our customers. We've got 500 of our 1,000 or so customers having been with us for more than 5 years. And helping us do that are a team of world-class engineers. They provide a full range of security services and solutions that support the IT security projects for all businesses at all stages, and that includes pre-sales, installation, support, and we offer these for all of our vendor solutions, as well as pure security solutions such as penetration testing, ethical hacking training, and technical audits. We partnered with Quorum in 2016, and this partnership has brought disaster recovery into our product and service portfolio, and we believe that efficient backup and recovery is kind of an essential part of any company's IT security strategy. In March 2017, Forces were acquired by Chess, a large ICT organization with approximately 550 employees. They have their own range of products and services, and forces have been acquired as a strategic purchase, filling out the cybersecurity portfolio of Chess and allowing Chess to offer cybersecurity into their customer base. Forces will continue to operate in the same way as before. Our head office will remain here in Bury St Edmunds, and you won't see any difference from that point of view. In November, we're going to have a name change. We're going to be rebranded and become Chess Cybersecurity. So here are a couple of screens here. I'm sure a few of you have seen these screens on various websites. Some nasty ransomware that has made the headlines. These two here, particular examples, are kind of very, very, very extreme examples that have made it into the media. Large-scale ransomware attacks. So what is ransomware? So ransomware is a specific strain of malware that threatens to publish the victim's data or perpetually block access to it unless a ransom is paid, which is usually in the form of a cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin. When properly implemented, it's impossible to unencrypt the data without the decryption keys. Here in this slide, we can see how ransomware has exploded over the last few years. Back in 2005, ransomware was very, very unknown as a strain of malware, and since then the number of ransomware strains has massively grown. And as the ransomware strains have grown, we can see from this slide that the cost of businesses has significantly grown. In the last 2 years, there's been a significant increase in ransomware attacks, and the overall cost to businesses is predicted to be $5 billion in 2017, and possibly up to $6 trillion by 2021. According to the UK government, half of all UK businesses have suffered a cyber breach or attack in the past 12 months, with the average cost to large businesses being approximately £20,000. With ransomware, the cost of the actual ransom is really only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the cost of the attack. The ransom, on average, is now between $600 to $700, usually payable in Bitcoin. But other costs include downtime. So organizations may be forced to shut down systems to deal with infection. Customers may be impacted and their associated services. There's incident response, so responding to a ransomware attack may require assistance of an incident response team to isolate the malware and bring system back online. There may be legal fees. Organizations may be hit with fines if customer data is affected, and other penalties also may apply. Data loss, so due to files being encrypted, lost or stolen, this can have a huge impact on businesses. Loss of company records, personally identifiable information, or intellectual property can be significantly impacted, and that impacts on the organization's finances, brand, and reputation. And under the up-and-coming GDPR regulations, ransomware events may constitute a data breach and subsequently have to be reported. In extreme cases, it could indeed lead to loss of life. As we saw with the WannaCry outbreak, it massively affected NHS organisations, so people's lives could be put at risk as essential medical equipment may be affected. While the costs may vary from company to company, the cost of ransomware itself is a small cost of the total cost for a business. And as we can see, ransomware is now big business and is not just the realm of one-off skilled hackers, but is also available as a service to anybody who wants to take part in this potentially lucrative cybercrime. So ransomware as a service. Ransomware as a service is a fairly new trend. As we can see here, this service, Satan, available on the Tor website via the Tor network, is an example of ransomware as a service available via the darknet. It's a very friendly user service. So when a person logs on to Satan, they are greeted with a homepage which describes what the service is and how the criminal may make money from it. Once the user registers an account, they're able to log in and they're greeted with an affiliate console. And that console contains various pages they can use to help to distribute their ransomware. These pages include malware droppers, options to translate the malware if you want to add additional language support, account notices, and messages pages. The droppers page shown on the screen provides code that assists the affiliate in creating the malicious Word documents, macros, etc. These can be used to then distribute the malware via spam or other means. Dark web spam services are also available. The account page is where the affiliate can see the amount of people infected and the amount of ransomware that they have accumulated. And finally, there is a notices page which can be used to display information from the developer of the product, and a messages page that can be used to log customer service requests if the users are struggling with the system. So most ransomware that's seen at the moment is delivered via email. That's the most common form of ransomware. These are usually via phishing emails, for example, coaching staff into opening dangerous attachments with active content, which is then followed up by their ransomware. And here are a couple of screens that you guys might be familiar with, trying to encourage users to actually open and enable macros and enable the ransomware to load. So the anatomy of a ransomware attack. There are several stages, and most ransomware takes a very, very similar process. So there's an installation via an exploit kit or a spam message with an infected attachment. And once that's on the machine, it generally modifies the system registry. Then there's contact with a command and control server. The ransomware sends information about the infected computer to the CNC server and downloads keys that are individual for that machine. Next is the encryption. So certain files are encrypted on the local computer and on any accessible network drives with the public key that it's just downloaded. Automatic backups of the OS, for example, shadow copies, are often switched off or deleted to prevent in-data recovery. Then there is a ransom demand, a ransom note that usually appears on the desktop for a ransom, often in the form of bitcoins, which can be paid within the time frame. The ransomware usually then cleans up after itself, leaving just the encrypted files and the ransom note behind. So I'm just going to go on and mention about a much more specific ransomware attack, one you're probably all familiar with, which was WannaCry, a large-scale outbreak which was very much in the media, and I'm sure you've all heard about. WannaCry worked differently to most of the common types of malware, and the main difference of that was that it was the speed of infection and how it was spread across organisations. It seemed to be most prevalent in the NHS within the UK, but all other UK organisations and worldwide organisations were affected as well. Particulars around the NHS where the infection rates were high were due to high proportions of unpatched servers and desktops, or old versions of unpatched desktops and servers that were vulnerable to the exploit that was used. The initial exploit that was used to infect machines with WannaCry was discovered by the NSA, but the information wasn't passed to Microsoft. And then a hacking group known as the Shadow Brokers gained access to the NSA information and published that online in April 2017. Microsoft eventually discovered the vulnerabilities, and on Tuesday, the 14th of March 2017, they issued a security bulletin titled MS1710, which detailed the flaw and announced that patches were available for the current supported versions of the Windows operating system. However, many Windows users had not installed the patches 2 months later, on May the 12th, when the ransomware struck. So WannaCry was quite different. It didn't require users to download it or execute an attachment. It actually exploited a vulnerability in unpatched versions of Microsoft Windows. So the first phase was kind of an external reconnaissance phase. So it was actually active on the internet, and it was searching for organizations where port 445 at SMB was actually exposed, and also exploitable with the Eternal Blue vulnerability. Once it found machines that were exposed, it then used the External Blue exploit via a CVE to gain access to the machine due to the weakness in SMB1 on unpatched OSs. There was actually a kill switch operation at this point, so the developer of the original strain of ransomware had actually left a URL unregistered, and the code checked for that domain, and if the domain was unregistered, then it carried on executing. Once it executed, it injected some code into the SMB system process, and it became persistent on the machine. Once that code is persistent on the machine, it's then on the network. It then does internal reconnaissance and starts the same process again inside the network. Again, looking for ports 445 that are open on any endpoints that are exploitable with the Eternal Blue exploit. It delivers its payload, again via the same exploit, and it copies itself across the network using the double pulsar payload, which is actually the method of running the attack. This then is executed on every single machine internally. So once the infection started on one machine, it laterally moves across the network, it starts on every other machine, and you get an exponential growth in number of clients affected. Once the machine has been taken control of, we get access to the file system, deletes the shadow file copy folders to prevent any user information being retrieved, does not allow booting or recovery mode, and starts to encrypt the files with the encryption keys that it's downloaded using the AES algorithm. Once that happens, the user receives the ransom note. And that's the screen which hopefully not too many of you are familiar with. So what could we do in order to prevent particular types of malware, or specifically this particular type of malware, moving through your network? So the first thing to do is to restrict access. So part of Forces' philosophy is defense in depth. We would be looking at perimeter security, so making sure that unless 100% necessary, that, for example, SMB port 445 wasn't exposed to any external networks. SMB file sharing protocol not generally used outside a network, so make sure those ports, etc., are locked down. That would actually stop anything getting in from the internet side. The next thing to do is patch the systems. Patch. Make sure all of your operating systems are running the latest versions if possible, and that they're all up to date with the latest security updates from the OS vendor. That also applies to any third-party applications as well, such as Adobe, Firefox, Chrome, etc., because they're often exploited as vectors for ransomware attacks. The next thing we would do is make sure that there are endpoint securities installed on the machines and that it's up to date. That would stop the code being injected into system processes. The endpoint security needs to be of a decent grade, needs to be up to date, and needs to be configured correctly. Those are the key things when it comes to endpoint security. That would stop everything getting externally onto your network. If it was on the network internally, there are some other measures we can put in place. So making sure devices are using a client firewall. So client firewall would stop any unused services being exposed, helping prevent lateral movement. Disable unused services, so where possible, any services that aren't absolutely required should be removed. Also running the most secure versions of those protocols that are in use. So for example, not using SMB1 and using SMB2 would also be appropriate. And again, make sure those client endpoints are patched. To block the next set of movement, again, we would rely on endpoint security, making sure the machines are up to date, make sure they're well patched, and make sure they've got endpoint security installed. Finally, as your last line of defense against a ransomware, you could look at something like a next generation technology such as a crypto guard. So a crypto guard doesn't need signatures, it doesn't need to know about the ransomware, it actually looks for active crypto activity on the disk. It will make a decision based on whether that thinks that crypto activity is legitimate or not, and it will then block that. Implementing these measures would actually seriously cut down on the chances of any ransomware getting into your machine or onto your network. Once it's on the network, having these bits and pieces in place will also stop any lateral movement. So any impact to any machines are limited to the machine that is actually infected at the time, and stops sideways movement throughout the network. So that's a brief bit about ransomware and WannaCry specifically. So I'd like to talk about preventative measures. So we always go for a defense in depth, a layered security approach, starting from the outside and moving into the endpoints. So perimeter protection is important. That includes firewalls, web gateways, email gateways. Perimeter firewalls should be restricted to ports and addresses that are absolutely necessary. Default drop rules should always be in place, and the use of any rules should be always discouraged. Email and web filtering. So devices should be set to scan all content for malware, including, in the example of web filtering, HTTPS content, as HTTPS content now makes up about 50% of internet traffic. It's important that we are looking inside the HTTP content for active code and malicious software. Removal of active content from documents such as PDFs and Excel and Word documents. Sandboxing technologies to identify any unknown or zero-day exploits by detonating those in a safe environment. Then we would look at patching as well, so making sure all the systems are patched, so making sure the Windows are up to date, using something like WSUS or SCCM as best practice. And then also third-party patching, so having an accurate inventory of your third-party applications that are installed in machines, and making sure that you're running the latest and most secure versions of those third-party solutions. We would also encourage endpoint security, so AV should be deployed to all endpoints. That includes desktops and servers. They should be up to date with a frequent up-to-date signature setting. They need to be correctly configured with things like on-write and on-access scanning enabled, and using exclusions sparingly and only when required, for example, on Exchange databases. Then we would also recommend the implementation of some sort of anti-ransomware, anti-exploit technology. This could be in the form of something like Sophos, indepth, something that actively blocks exploits and crypto activity on the disk. So there we are. So that's a bit about ransomware, a bit about how we would do a defense in depth layered security approach. And that's all very well and good. But sometimes ransomware does get through to your machine. So you can have many, many layers, but for some reason, something gets through to your machine. And what we're going to look at now is what happens if ransomware does strike. And I'm going to hand over to Neill here, who's going to carry on the presentation and talk about Quorum.
Thank you, Gavin. So the first couple of things that I want to do is just give you an introduction to Quorum. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the business. We predominantly focus on just backup and data recovery. We just have solutions in that area. We've extended our offering just recently in the last couple of years to provide hybrid cloud as well. And we have a hybrid cloud set up in the US and in London, and we're looking at rolling that out now into other territories across the world, because rightly so, data sovereignty is a big issue for our clients globally. We focus on providing an easy to use, affordable solution that's very, very simple to use. We've typically done pretty well in medium to large size businesses, focusing across multiple verticals in finance, legal, healthcare, and government. Although we've just got a new small business offering as well, which I'll just position as part of today's session. We're actually a pretty mature business. We were founded back in 2008, and the original technology that forms the basis for the OnQ product was used in a naval contract in the US, and they used the technology that underpins OnQ to provide failover of IT systems from one part of the battleship to another in the event of an issue. We productized that IP back in 2010, and we've been running as a standalone backup and data recovery business ever since then. We're US based. We do all of our development in the US. We don't offshore to other sort of lower cost parts of the world. And we do that predominantly to ensure high quality of the offering, and to kind of keep our arms around, exactly what occurs with the product as it's developed. We're part of a venture capital fund called Toba Capital, which is a fund set up by Vinnie Smith, who was the gentleman that was the president of Quest Software. After Vinnie sold his business off to Dell Software back in 2013, Vinnie went and formed the Toba Capital Fund, and we're now one of 60 firms under management by Toba Capital. Okay, so let's drill into the presentation itself now. We follow a very, very similar message to the one that we talked about earlier on in the session. We believe defense in depth is the way to keep your systems protected and safe. And we kind of think about the data as the sort of soft insides, and they're protected by a layered shell. Without a secure physical boundary, the building that the data center's in, you're exposed. Without perimeter application and host level security, again, there's exposures there that people can get through to the data and compromise that data. And as Gavin showed you in the slides prior to this, denials of service are becoming more and more prevalent, and we try and encourage all of our customers to make provisions so that if the worst happens, they're covered. Typically, we recommend that when people are looking at new backup and data recovery solutions, that they should encourage that the fact-finding work that they do to ensure that 4 things are covered off. You need quick recovery of the data. You need to be able to recover the servers quickly, and you need to be able to get the applications back up as quickly as possible. Particularly with things like ransomware, you need the ability to recover from any point in time. If there's bad data, it's going to be backed up. So you need to be able to go back to a recovery point that is clean somewhere in your retention policy. We also think with a modern backup and data recovery solution, you need the ability to keep your business up online and keep your users productive while you go and do the remedial work. And with our OnQ offering, we can provide that with our ready-to-run recovery nodes. And then last but not least, you need the ability to fail back and get the cleaned production systems back online at some point in the future. And using a solution like the one that we're going to talk to this afternoon, you can do that with the bare minimum of stress, hopefully. Okay, so as we talked about earlier, what if protection fails? We recommend that you go through a staged plan like the one we're showing on the screen at the moment. And probably the first most important thing to do is to go disconnect the server that's been infected or compromised. Essentially, the IT team become a kind of incident response team at this point. You need to go and broadcast to the business what's going on, what impact there's going to be to the users. And then once you've done that, you need to kick off a sort of triage process to go and investigate further what's actually occurred on the server, where the log files are, and exactly at what time that problem occurred on the environment that's got a problem at the moment. Next, you want to go through and do a very, very thorough check of the environments. We recommend that you go and do a very, very thorough search there of all of the network resources. So, the IT team need to kind of divide and conquer at this point, and we need to go and work through all the network drives, get everybody involved, delegate this out, and start looking through the file systems for the known extension variants where there have been issues. And these are going to be things like .server, .crypt, .enigma, .lock. And at the bottom of the slide here, I've just got a link to an online resource that can give you a little bit more information on that. And we'll try and share these slides after the presentation today. So once we've checked the environment, we need to move on. We need to find out where patient 0 was, locate the source of the issue, the source of the infection, and make sure that that's disabled. And again, we need to keep going through, doing our triage, trying to find out where the locks occurred, what times they kicked in at. And typically there'll be a README on the file system that's been locked with a name like how to decrypt. You need to find out where that file is, check the owner of that, and go through that and find exactly what sort of suggestions are being made there. Really important to try and minimize the sort of the infection by going around and looking at all of the logs and using those logs to your advantage. So go through things like the Windows event logs, try and figure out when the file changes occurred, and really sort of nip that in the bud. And again, right at the end, we need to just make sure that everything's taken off the network, everything's isolated, just to reduce further infection. So at this point, it's time to recover. The way that we recommend to do it with the Quorum solution is using that intelligence that you've found as you've been going through the file system, try and determine what the time of infection was, and then try and go back to your last good backup and power that up and do further testing. It's a bit like Gavin's analogy earlier with patching, patch. In this kind of scenario, you need to test. And what we recommend you do is bring up those recovery nodes that sit on the Quorum OnQ platform and bring it up on an isolated test network. Don't risk it on your production network until you're completely satisfied. So power up that recovery node in test, do a very, very thorough test, and then when you're completely satisfied it's good, power it up on the live network, get the users back on, and at this point, using the Quorum recovery nodes, you've essentially bought yourself some time to go and figure this out and come back with a proper clean setup and recovery. The good thing about the recovery nodes that we provide is you go back to any point in time and you can run on them for as long as you need to. We had a client out in the UAE a few months back that were hit by ransomware, and they failed over within the hour to their recovery nodes, and they sat running on those recovery nodes until they could take the system down in their weekend. At that point, they did a restore, and then when their users came back in on Sunday morning, it was completely transparent to them that they'd been through and been compromised. And essentially what we're saying is don't pay the ransom, don't transfer those bitcoins, let's just use the BDR platform and recover. So while we're running on those recovery nodes, you can then step into what we call a kind of deep clean process. Here you're going to go through and fix the problem on patient 0. There's multiple ways to do that. You could do a Windows restore of the platform. If it's just a workstation, and this is the one I've seen pretty often, you just reformat the disk and start again, and there might be a small amount of data loss, but that's just one of the sort of fallouts from this sort of thing. And then the last thing is you can use some tools for cleaning up the servers and get yourselves back straight using those kind of products. To get back to production using the OnQ platform, we provide a bare metal recovery capability, and we do that through a module within the product called Quark. I'm not sure who comes up with these names, but there's method in the madness. Quark is our Quorum Advanced Recovery Kit, and in using that tool, it gives you the ability to build a bootable ISO of the system that we had under protection. So you can reboot the machine using that clean ISO. Once the operating system's there, we can then do a recovery from the data that we've stored onto the OnQ platform And we can do two types of recovery at that point. We can do an incremental recovery, where we've been through a sort of non-catastrophic failure, or in the event of a very serious failure, we can do a full BMR, where we build the system back from first principles. And that could be on differing types of hardware, could be on different platform. You know, we can support that all with the Quorum products. When that's done, you just go through a sort of reverse of the failover process, where we power down the recovery node and we power on the production server, and we can do that with zero data loss, which is, you know, going to reduce a lot of stress for your departments. And then, kind of last but not least, when you've failed over to the recovery node, the Quorum OnQ appliance continues to take backups. So, you know, again, that contributes to the lack of data loss. Earlier this year, we brought out a new version of the OnQ platform, which we call the OnQ Ransomware Edition. We've done this in a way that allows the product to be sort of implemented at a minimal cost and with minimal complexity. The Ransomware Edition is a pretty lightweight version of the product, and what we can do with the OnQ RE box is protect up to 15 individual servers. They can be a mix of physical or virtual servers. They can be on Windows, VMware, or all of the other main hypervisors, or we also support Linux on the Red Hat kernel. So we can support any boxes on those platforms. In the Ransomware Edition, we provide 22 terabytes of storage and a fairly powerful system that will provide support for those recovery nodes in the event of a failure. And what we've tried to do with the latest version of the OnQ platform is give you a failover system that runs at pretty much near production speed. We've done that with a clever use of NVMe caching and 10 gig networking. And we managed to boost the performance up of the latest platform of OnQ from 800 IOPS to 25,000 IOPS using the mix of NVMe and high-speed networking. Our clever engineers in San Jose have managed to bypass the hypervisor that we use for our virtual images, so that we can do essentially, you know, direct I/O using the hardware technology that we use. Using the Ransomware Edition platform, we're able to provide file level backups and then application consistent snapshots as well that run on our virtual copies of all of the environments that are under protection. So this really kind of gives a whole new meaning to being able to save your bacon. We can provide a one-click recovery for any of the infected servers that may occur within your environment. Very, very simple to deploy. We do all of the configuration for your network environment back at base in California. And then when the system arrives at your site, all you need to do is rack and stack that appliance, set up protection, and then off you go. We can provide the capability to test those recovery servers at any time. We can either do that through a self-test that we can fire off at any point of the calendar day. The other thing we can do is run those recovery nodes at any point in time on an alternate network. So back to this sort of patching methodology to keep yourself safe. You can spin up the recovery nodes on your test network. Those recovery nodes will be you know, virtually up to date in terms of the production system, and you can go run OS patches or application patches on those recovery nodes with a bare minimum of work. And our customers really love that functionality because it allows them to provide a test environment with virtually no work for the IT team, which is super time saving. We can coexist with other protection solutions, so we can work well with other backups, we can work well with firewall technologies and the like, and we do that with the majority of our client base globally. The way that the appliance works ensures that it's pretty much invisible to the network. You know, we don't rely on DNS, we don't rely on Active Directory, and thanks to those minimal attack vectors, it makes OnQ, you know, virtually impervious to infection, and that's been, you know, very, very helpful with our client base. So the next slide just gives you a feel for the range of offerings from Quorum at the moment. We talked a little bit about the Ransomware Edition, which sits to the sort of middle left of the page there, and that's focused on providing protection for about 15 servers, and it gives you the ability to run one or two of those environments in the event of a failure or a ransomware attack. In the middle is our more traditional product range, which is the traditional OnQ HA or DR appliance, and we provide a range of appliances in that space that allow you to protect systems and data from 5 through 50 terabytes. Towards the right of the page there, we have our sort of higher end offerings. The pod is our sort of enterprise scale backup and data recovery solution, and that scales up through 400 terabytes and a couple of terabytes of RAM, and we utilize there the Dell Blade chassis system and modular storage, which allows you to add, you know, compute and storage as your system grows, and that's essentially the underpinning that we've used for our cloud environments. As I said earlier on in the session, we now have the Quorum Cloud situated in the US and in the UK, and we're looking to stretch that further across the world as the next year unfolds. And the Quorum Cloud is a very, very secure offering. We put that in you know, very, very secure data centers, and we provide firewalling and VPN technology there with the cloud to allow you to fail over to that second copy if need be. And then kind of last but not least, we've got this new OnQ solution, which is focused for the small to medium business. That's a small standalone tower box that a smaller business can take on board pretty easily, and that will allow you to protect up to 7 systems and run 3 recovery nodes in the event of a failure. And that's a fantastic way to get yourselves covered off for BDR with the bare minimum of cost and configuration overhead to your business. The next couple of slides just give you a sort of pictorial representation of what the OnQ product looks like plugged into a typical environment. Here we're protecting a SQL server, an Exchange box, and a Linux box, and the GUI down at the bottom there is our Quorum OnQ portal. Very, very graphical at the moment. You know, everything's looking great. Everything's in green. We can see we're connected to the nodes that we're protecting. We can see that we've got RNs or recovery nodes, which are our ready to run virtual copies, and everything's looking great. Here we're seeing a failure in the Exchange environments. The user screen goes blue because that system's gone away, and we can see there from the portal as well, using the color coding of the nodes, that the system's gone unavailable. To power up that recovery node on the OnQ appliance is literally a one-click action. We just click on that red button. It will then go spin up the ready-to-run clone on the OnQ portal, and within minutes the users can get back on to that virtual copy of the environment, and that gives you then the time as an IT group to go figure out what the problem was, make a recovery, you know, whatever form of recovery is needed, and get back up and running with the bare minimum of impact to your business. We can take that forward if we wanted to, where protection is really critical to the business. So here what we've done is we've replicated the high availability copy of the data to another copy, and this situation we're replicating out to the Quorum cloud. So we've got a real belt and braces backup solution here, where we're taking 2 copies of the environments. If we have a critical failure here, so we can see the LANs failed, we've then got the ability to spin up those ready-to-run recovery nodes in the cloud, and then using our firewalling and VPNing technology, you can reconnect the user base to those alternate copies whilst you're going through the process of recovery and getting back in good shape. Okay, so in summary, why use the Quorum OnQ platform? I think the key things that we really try and focus on here are, it's a super easy solution to install. It's a fantastically easy solution to use, and it gives you a very, very quick recovery to get the systems back up and running. And also, once you have failed over, those recovery nodes run at SSD speeds on our OnQ platform. So it really does, not provide a huge amount of detriment to the user base. We do that through a unified user interface, so we make that very, very simple to use. Going back to our military heritage, it's a very, very secure solution. We encrypt all of the data in motion, and now we encrypt all of the data at rest as well. And it's a very, very scalable solution as well. We utilize compression on the appliances and in the virtual SAN. And with the new sort of pod infrastructure as well, we have the ability for you to grow the OnQ offering as your business grows. Okay, well, thank you everybody for your time this afternoon. We're just going to look and see if we've got any questions coming in, and Gavin and I will we'll just try and answer those questions for you first, if that's okay. So we've got one question come in, and that was just around the sort of data sovereignty aspect of the OnQ solution. And our questions come in just asking whereabouts is the backup data stored. For the UK, we have a data center for the Quorum cloud in Enfield, just north of London. So it's kept in the UK to maintain full data sovereignty. For our US customers, we have 2 data centers. We've got one in San Jose, and then we've got one in New Jersey as well, just to ensure that both seaboards are covered off in the US. We're looking to grow that capability, I think I alluded to earlier on in the session, and we're in conversations at the moment with our partners in the UAE. We're in conversation with a partner in Singapore, and we're in conversations with our main partner in South Korea as well, to broaden the cloud offering into those territories. So hopefully that answers that question there. Okay, we don't seem to have any more questions at this point in time. I think what I would suggest is if anybody comes up with any questions or further queries offline, please don't hesitate to get in contact with the Forces team or the Quorum team moving forwards, and we'd be very happy to follow up, either on the phone or in person, and to give you a little bit more insight into the product and also the sort of ransomware phenomenon. Okay, so with that, I'd just like to say thank you to Gavin for the fantastic session. I thought there was an excellent insight provided there, and very, very informative. And thank you, Forcis, for hosting the session today. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.